Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Welcome to this webinar, this session run by the European consumer organization, BEUC. And this is all about what consumers expect from the digital euro. We're going to delve into that question. We're going to hear a survey that BEUC has put together that gives us a clear outline of what consumers across the European Union are looking for. My name is Jack Parrock. I'm a Brussels-based journalist, a correspondent working often for the German public broadcaster, Deutsche Welle, but many other different publications as well. Delighted to have been asked along to come and moderate this session. For you to know, the session is being recorded throughout the next hour and a half that we will be speaking. And for those of you that are joining as participants, there is going to be the possibility to ask Q&A to our panelists, also to the people that are presenting the survey that you're going to see any moment. So please feel free to use that Q&A tool, and we'll try and get as many questions to the people, to the speakers as we possibly can. Okay, there's loads going on, obviously, so much to discuss. To start this session, we are just going to have some opening remarks that are going to come from Anna Martin, who is the Head of Financial Services at BEUC. It's really great that you're with us. Please, Anna.
Thank you very much, Jack, and good afternoon to everyone. Very warm welcome from my side. I'm very pleased to see so many of you being interested into our consumer survey and the topic of consumer expectations towards the digital euro. That's really great. Actually, this webinar takes place at a very perfect timing because we just got a couple of days ago the announcement from the Parliament rapporteur that he's starting to work on his report on the digital euro. We also know that the Council is very busy in discussing the file, heading towards a general approach towards the end of the year. So it's really a good moment to take stock on the digital euro and in particular on the consumer expectations. So today's webinar is organized around a survey which we conducted as BEUC together with our members and partners. And it's a survey about the expectations of consumers towards digital payments in 10 euro area countries, so very representative. And we wanted to understand what are the experiences consumers have with digital payments, what are also the difficulties which they have paying digitally. And the objective of the survey is to inform the design of the digital euro and to make it as consumer-friendly as possible. So my colleague Mireia will dive you and present into the survey in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to share already a bit of some personal highlights of things which I found really interesting in the report. So first of all, what struck me was the number of people who fell into fraud related to digital payments. It's very worrying. We have 1 out of 5 consumers in the survey who reported that they have been, in the past 5 years, victim of fraud or a security breach related to their bank account or to their credit or debit card. So these numbers are very high, and it's something really showing us that a digital payment method has to be first and foremost safe and secure for consumers. The second aspect which I wanted to highlight and which was really important for me is the aspect of having difficulties with digital payments. And we had a very high number of people who already helped a family member or a friend in making a digital payment because that person had difficulties in doing it on his own. So this is something which I think is very important because we hear a lot in digital payments about it has to be smooth and frictionless, etc. But actually, a lot of people have trouble using payments and digitally and are less digitally than what we want them perhaps to be. And for instance, a lot of people, 88% to be precise, who want to have still a payment card, which is of course digital, but still also physical in their hands, rather than just paying with a QR code on their smartphone. We will get to more of these results, and I'm very much looking forward to them. But for me, these figures really show that it's really useful that we are working towards this public payment method as a digital euro. And I think the objective of the webinar today is really also to discuss how we make this digital euro attractive for consumers, rather than discussing too much on do we need it, or is there an added value of a digital euro, which is a discussion which we had a lot in Brussels in the last months. But ultimately, the question is more about how we make it attractive for consumers. How do we make it an added value for people in their everyday life to have a public payment method in the digital sphere? So that's the objective for today. And I'm very happy that we have a lot of knowledgeable people today with us. And I think one of those which is really best placed to talk about the digital euro is actually Evelyn Whitlock. And I'm very happy that you're here with us today, presenting from the European Central Bank perspective, what is the digital euro project, why do we need it, and why is it important, or how can it really deliver for consumers? So I'm very pleased and looking forward to your keynote speech and bringing the first insights, and then we will build upon this throughout the webinar. So thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for this very nice introduction, and thank you for organizing this event and for having done the research. A digital euro can only be successful if it is appreciated by all stakeholders. So the consumers, the merchants, and the distributors of the digital euro, the PSPs. So I'm very happy that we are now able to talk from a consumer perspective, that we can also have the results from your study, and in the panel we will go back on that in a bit more detail after your presentation on those, on how we can make sure that the digital euro lives up to the needs of the citizens now and towards the future. So indeed, my name is Evelyn Whitlock. I'm the Digital Euro Program Manager at the ECB. And I will give you a brief talk on the digital euro. We saw from the research that the awareness of the digital euro has really risen in the last years, but on people understanding it fully, there is still work to be done. So maybe this presentation can help there as well. So first of all, why do we need a digital form of cash? And actually, I think that's already the start of a very fundamental consideration. So we are in an environment where you have payment options. So you have cash, you have card, you have bank accounts, and other digital means of payments. So actually cash versus digital payments, and we have had that over the years. I think if you look back 30 years ago, the most of our transactions we did in cash, but we have going to love to pay digitally much more over time. So we see that in the share of payments, people are more and more also use digital means of payments. So very simply put, the digital euro would be a digital form of cash. Everything in society is moving to digital. So it is, we believe, not more than logic that we also bring cash to the digital age and try to preserve and to copy as much of the characteristics that are loved from cash also in the digital age. On this slide, very important, the digital euro will be an additional option. So I would like to stress that the digital euro will not be a replacement of cash. There will be cash. The euro system remains committed to cash. We, as you might have seen, we're looking for a new design of the banknote. So we're also investing in cash to make sure that it's fit for future. But it will be an additional option that also in a digital environment you can pay with digital cash. And it will bring a couple of benefits. So it's pan-European. You might currently know, and maybe you have just accepted it as a way of life, that there are payment methods that you can use in one country, but when you crosses the border, you can no longer pay with that. So digitally, we actually don't have one euro. We have different forms, and not all of them are accepted. With a digital euro, that would be in place. It will be free for basic use for Euro area citizens. It will deliver a high level of privacy. I will say more about this later on in the presentation. And it will also provide an offline functionality. And that is actually important for two reasons. It delivers a very high level of privacy, very close to cash, but also it adds to the resilience. So if there's no internet connection or an outage on electricity, it can still function. If we go to the next slide, let me dive into a topic that has come more under scrutiny, or actually has gained importance if we look to what is happening over the last months, is that we need to make sure as Europe that we can guarantee and safeguard our strategic autonomy. We look on for that in multiple areas, but also for payments, this is important. So if we go to the next slide, here you see a landscape of Europe, and you see it's very fragmented and very reliant on international card schemes. So 13 out of the 20 Euro area countries have no domestic scheme available. And we also see that though in those countries where they are actually losing market share. So this leads to a situation that more than 60% of our transactions are processed on non-European rails. So if we go to the next slide, we think that this is a concern. As I said before, we are all concerned on a lot of areas on our autonomy. For example, in defense or in energy, it is very clear. We have also very clear plans, but also for payments is just as urgent. I mean, just imagine that for one day, nobody could pay digitally. Could you imagine the unrest that would come, and what it would mean for society that for one day we could not pay digitally? So this is important, that we make sure that we keep ownership of our infrastructure for payments to guarantee that we can always pay. If we go to the next slide, another element, and that's of course it's a more economic element, is of course being so reliant on 2-3 big players that are non-European. This also comes with a price tag. So and it doesn't have to be this way. And so as I said already on this acceptance that you sort of agree or understand that digitally you cannot pay in the same way across Europe, it doesn't have to be their way, and we have the power to unify our payment market. So let me go into the next slide on the digital euro, which would deliver on these elements. It would be pan-European, it would be on European rails, but very important, it would also protect privacy. When we talk to consumers, we still see quite some concern on privacy. So I think it's important that we can take this away, because in the design of the digital euro, privacy is at the core. So if I start at the bottom, we will have this offline functionality, and that will mean that you can hold your digital euros in a secure element. That's a chip. So either in your phone or potentially, we're still investigating that, on a card, where you can really hold your digital euro. So it's like putting cash in your pocket. And if you then come in a store, or you meet a friend and you want to make a payment, the transaction will be done between the two devices. So these transactions will not go on any internet and any online, and will be as private as for cash. Then next to the offline, we also have the online one. And there, the legislator who has made the draft legislation needs to find a balance between one side to fight anti-money laundering, to fight fraud, but on the other side, deliver privacy. So there you see that the payments will be initiated via the banks. They will do the work as they currently do in order to prevent fraud, in order to prevent anti-money laundering, contra terrorist financing. But then when the transaction would go to the European Central Bank for settlement, the bank will anonymize the transaction. That will mean that in our systems, we don't have the data of the person. We just have a unrecognizable string of numbers and maybe signs, cryptographic signs, that would make the payment anonymous and will allow us to process the payment, but without connecting this transaction to any person that is there. So with that, we believe that with privacy and data protection, we provide a very high level and hope to be able to take away the concerns of those that have them. If we go to the next slide, here it's also about financial inclusion, and Anna has said something on that already in her introduction. So the digital euro is also designed to leave no one behind. So it needs to be inclusive and accessible. So a couple of things that we have discussed and are currently also considered in the draft legislation is that next to the mobile way of paying, so paying with your mobile phone, there should also be a physical card where you can pay with digital euros. It also describes that for those that find it difficult to, for example, onboard on a new solution, that there's face-to-face technical support within a country. And also there's an option to easily switch between banks. Now, sometimes if you want to move bank account, it's quite a hassle, but with the digital euro, you get one number, and if you move from bank, you can keep the number, so allowing switching and making it easy. The offline functionality I've already described. It's a very cash-like solution. The public authorities, that's already what I said, actually that's connected to the second point, is that can provide them with face-to-face support. I go to the next slide. Also, the digital euro is not there just to keep the current state, but it's also fostering innovation. And here you see an example which focuses mainly on inclusion. We have done work with the market in the last half year, where we asked market parties to work with us on finding new innovative use cases, leveraging the power of the digital euro. We published a report on that last Friday, and there are these examples for financial inclusions, so things that we can really do with the digital euro. Apart from that, there are other examples, not here, but we have them in the report, that, for example, make it easier to pay on delivery, for example, or you only pay your train ticket once you have really arrived in time at the location where you need to be. So digital euro will be fostering innovation and making life easier and better for all of us. If I go to the next slide, we don't do this in an ivory tower. I think this is very important. We do this together with the stakeholders. So we have the banks, the payment service providers, the consumer organizations, as well as the merchant organizations. And we talked with them on two levels. We talked to them on more the policy items, as I discussed before, but also one level deeper. And this is what we call the scheme. And the scheme should really make sure that there's a harmonized experience, like for banknotes, so that you can trust that even if you have a bank in Spain, if you travel to Germany or in Finland and you go to Ireland, that your payment solutions are always accepted. And for that, you need to have technical standards to make that possible. In the context of that rulebook development group, for example, there are also discussions on how disputes could be handled. So very important work, and we're very happy also with BEUC participating very actively in those sessions. If I go to the next slide, I am already nearing the end because I'm talking about what's ahead. If I go to the next slide, what's ahead of us, We have done the investigation phase where we discussed mainly the design of the digital euro, and we are now nearing the end of the preparation phase where we actually became more concrete. So we have done a lot of work on the scheme rulebook. There's currently a version 0.9 in consultation with the rulebook development group. We have just announced today that we have selected the service providers. These are just framework agreements, but will allow us to do call-offs when the time is there. And we have done a lot of learning through experimentation, which I showed, and we really did further deep dive also to prepare for a next phase. So we will go back to our governing council in the course of this year, by the end of the year, and then present a plan for the next steps for the digital euro. And of course, that decision is informed also by the legislative debate that's currently going. Anna already mentioned that. So the Commission positioned their proposal in summer 2023. And the Council is making good progress, as Anna said, by the end of the year. And also the Parliament has done a lot of pre-work, but the rapporteur will bring his report forward in the coming months. And that is very important. The ECB supports this with technical support, but also I keep stressing the ECB will not take any decision on an issuance before the legislation has been adopted. And with that, I think I go to the last slide, and I want to thank you for your attention and looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evelien, for coming in and doing that presentation for us. It's firstly, obviously, very useful to get your insights and information, but we're also going to get into the discussion with you. Like I said, there's a Q&A possible, and Evelien will be joining the panel after we hear the presentation of the survey. So if you've got any questions for her, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A tool. But without further ado, let's talk about the survey that BEUC have put together. And Maria Lamberic-Anto, who is BEUC's Financial Services Policy Assistant, is going to come in and give us a bit of a rundown, a flavour of the key elements in this survey and what we need to know about it, both as consumers, but also as policymakers.
Yes, thank you very much, Jack, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. And indeed, now I'm going to present you the results from this survey that we carried out this summer between May and June of 2025, and that we summarized into the report Free, Easy and Secure, What Consumers Expect from the Digital Euro, that we published last Thursday, so you can already find it on BEUC's website. And with the next slide, we'll start with a bit of context. So the survey was conducted in the 10 euro area countries that you can see in this slide, and as part of a call from tender from the ECB to conduct independent user research to inform the design of the digital euro. So we collected approximately over 10,000 responses, approximately 1,000 per member state. And the responses were on payment experiences, more general, instead of asking directly questions about the digital euro to avoid biases in the response. So we collected insights on payments in a more general way. And we drafted a questionnaire based on existing research on the digital euro to be able to get more detailed insights. And we also drafted a separate questionnaire for teens, so for young consumers aged between 14 and 17 years old that are already highly digital and will potentially be early adopters of the digital euro, but that they haven't been included yet in existing research. So throughout the whole report, we compare the data among the different ages, and we also have a specific section on the teens. So starting now with the content, one of the questions that we asked in the survey was, if a new digital payment method was introduced, which are the most important features that it should have? And in order of importance, the answers were, in the first place, security and reliability, followed by ease of use, that it has no or very low fees, the possibility to get a refund in case of fraud, that it ensures privacy of personal data, and being universally accepted. So then, based on these results, we organized the report, developing the first 5 main features. And then the report is followed by a section, the mentioned section on teens, then a section related to cash preferences, a final question on awareness on the digital euro, and finally BEUC's policy recommendations. And now I'm going to give you a brief overview of all this. So yeah, next slide, please. So starting with security and fraud, we saw that concerns about security are high in all age groups. So for instance, 82% of adults and 77% of teens are concerned about becoming a victim of online fraud, scams, or cyber attacks. And in fact, 22% of adults and 18% of teens reported that they have been already a victim of a fraud or security breach related to a digital payment in the past 5 years, which, as Anne already mentioned in the introduction, we consider a very high number, both for concerns and for victims, and especially taking into account the teens' data. And then we also asked the victims which type of fraud or security breach they were victim of, and the most common case across all ages and cases was phishing. Then we also asked about the possibility to be refunded in case of fraud or scams, and 85% of both teens and adults stated that providers should grant a refund in case they are victims of fraud. So based on all this data, BEUC's recommendation for the digital euro is that it needs to offer strong fraud prevention, so before the fraud happens, and also protection once it has happened, to make sure that it's considered as a safe payment option. So how we can do that? So having an easy refund procedure and dispute resolution systems, so at the level of international card schemes, so covering a wide range of disputes, including commercial disputes that offer a fair treatment to consumers. Now I'll move to the second topic, which is the results related to ease of use and inclusion. And in here we saw that cards are the preferred payment method for adults, both paying physically and online, and for teens when they pay online. So, and also that 88% of both adults and teens believe that every bank account should offer a free payment card. And we also saw that 85% of both adults and teens believe that everyone should have access to a basic bank account free of charge. Then on questions about accessibility, we also saw that accessibility is currently not sufficiently achieved with existing methods. So more than half of the respondents, 55% adults, 51% teens, reported that they have faced at least one difficulty when making digital payments. And in here, the cases range from like declined payments, website crashes, lack of skills, having forgotten your password, concerns about security, etc. Then 39% of adults and 46% of teens reported having helped a friend or family member to make a digital payment. And when we asked about the reasons, they responded that mainly it was because the person that they were helping didn't know how to make the payment. So lack of skills of the person. And then other reasons were that the person needed help registering or installing the app, concerns about security, and having a lack of access to digital payment methods or to digital devices. So from these findings, BEUC's recommendations for the digital euro are that a payment card, which is the most used method for both adults and teens online, that it's included as a basic service of the digital euro, so free of charge. Then that the EU Accessibility Act standards are fully implemented or exceeded in the digital euro, as it's a public solution that can fill this accessibility gap, as Evelyn also mentioned in her presentation, and that in-person support is available for all consumers that wish to have human advice and without having entry requirements. So for instance, that it's not only available for vulnerable consumers and then having to prove that you're vulnerable, but like open advice to everyone. And from here, we move to the attitudes towards privacy and data sharing. And here, the results show that consumers are more comfortable sharing personal data for fraud prevention or anti-money laundering checks, and that willingness to share lowers when it's for commercial purposes or with third parties. We can also see from these numbers that teens are generally more comfortable sharing their personal data than adults. And also we saw that across all ages, that men tended to be more willing to share their data than women. Then as regards concerns for privacy violations, such as misuse of personal or financial data or law enforcement surveillance, we saw that concerns are high. 81% of adults and 72% of teens said that they are at least somewhat concerned. So in light of this, BEUC recommends having enhanced privacy in the digital euro, both online and offline. So privacy online can be achieved with a sound implementation of the GDPR and clear purpose limitations of the processing of data. Privacy offline, so for proximity payments, can be enhanced by having lighter onboarding requirements and preventing the storage of data. And of course, that there is strong data security, including cybersecurity, and that the data is stored in Europe. Now, even though we've already seen a bit of data on teens, we wanted to give you an overview of the section that we have focused on young consumers. And first of all, we observed that teens are highly digital. So across the 10 countries, they used an average of more than 2 digital devices to access the internet. But then we also saw that their preferences are restricted. So 26% of teens did not make any digital payment in the past year, compared with, for example, 4% of adults. And the main reason it's because they are not allowed by their parents. Then there's other reasons like having no need, preferring traditional payment methods like cash or cards, or not having a bank account. Then from another question on payment habits, we saw that 49% of teens use cash frequently in stores, compared with 42% of adults. So to our surprise, we realized that teens mostly use cash and are actually relying on it to pay in many cases, and even more than adults. So then for the teens that do use digital payments, we asked them what are the most important aspects for them to choose one. And in order of importance, the first one is that it's easy to use, then safe, that the checkout process is quick, that it's easy to track purchases, that ensures privacy, has low or no fees, and that it's widely accepted. So from these findings, we thought that the digital euro could add extra safety features and controls, such as transaction or spending limits, that can encourage parents to allow teens to use them, and then consequently they'll have a broader access to paying digitally. And now I've been talking about cash a bit, so we move to one of the last sections of the report and from my presentation as well, which is dedicated to cash preferences. And the results of the survey showed that there is a strong support and usage of cash, not only by teens, as I just said, but across all generations. And we also see concerns. So 52% of adults and 46% of teens reported that they fear losing the opportunity to choose between different payment methods, such as cards, cash, digital wallets, etc., in the future. And also, curious enough, from the segmentation of the results, this concern is highest among adults that are between 27 and 51 years old, with higher level of digital literacy. And the lowest level of concern is among those with low level of digital and financial literacy. Then we also observed that support for keeping cash available is very high. So 85% of both adults and teens believe that cash should be accepted everywhere at no additional cost. And we also saw that half of the respondents, 48% adults, 49% teens, prefer digital payments over cash whenever possible. So from all these findings, BEUC's recommendation is that mandatory acceptance and effective access to cash is guaranteed via the legal tender cash regulation that is currently in the legislative process, together with the digital euro regulation under the single currency package. And as regards communication, as Evelyn mentioned as well in her presentation, that efforts are made to communicate that the digital euro is here to complement cash and existing payment methods, and not to substitute it, as we've seen the concerns. Now, finally, the last question of the survey questionnaire, and also from my presentation, was a direct question on the digital euro that we asked to measure awareness. So we asked people if they had heard and if they were informed about the digital euro. And from this graph, we can see if we add the first two segments, that 58% of adults are aware, but only 11% are informed about it. And from the segmentation of the results, we discovered that the highest awareness is among digitally literate men, and the lowest is for those with low digital literacy that live in small villages. When it comes to teens, 49% of teens are aware of the digital euro, but only 9% are informed about it. And the highest awareness is for the teens that live in large cities with at least another teen sibling, and the lowest awareness is for the teens that don't have another teen sibling. And this would be the end of my presentation on the Digital Euro and Digital Payment Survey and report. So I hope these findings offer valuable insights for those shaping the Digital Euro and for the panel discussion that we have now. And thank you very much. And I'm happy also to answer any questions on the presentation if there are.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thanks for presenting that for us. Also, thanks for the work that you've done in putting it together and choosing those sort of key insights. I think it's really interesting, like you said, surprising that teens actually are using cash. I suppose it's a surprise, but then when you think about it, parents giving their children and their teens money, it does actually make sense. That's what the value in these surveys come about. That's why we're so glad that you've done it. Thanks for your work. As Maria said, if you have any questions that you would like to put to her, you can also use the Q&A tool to do so. And on the BEUC website, the survey is there and the results are a bit more in depth. So please do go and take a look. But for now, we're going to get into our panel discussion about this. And I'm delighted that joining us here on the webinar, I've got Damien Boeselager. He's a member of the European Parliament. He's a German MEP from the Volt Party. And he's also the Vice President of the European Parliament's Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. We're delighted that you're here. We have Seu Pereira, who is the team leader for the Digital Euro in DG FISMA of the European Commission. We have Vincent Reitvink, who is the Financial Services Attaché at the Permanent Representation of the Netherlands. We're delighted that you're here. We've also got Evelyn Whitlocks, who is the Programme Director, as we've heard already, of the Digital Euro at the European Central Bank. And last but not least, we have Vinay Pranjivan, who is the Senior Economist at the Portuguese consumer organisation DECO. Wonderful that you're all here. Let's get into this. I'll start with you, Damien. Perhaps we can get some of your opinions, your feedback on the results of this survey that we've just heard from Maria and how that fits into what you're seeing, what you're hearing in your work in the European Parliament.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I have to apologize because of delayed transport. I will only be able to turn on my video in around 10 minutes. So excuse me for that. But
that's okay. We can hear you. We've got you. So that's wonderful.
Very good. So thanks a lot for the presentations. I mean, it's extremely insightful. Rather than like giving a longer intro statement, I would react on a couple of things when it comes to consumer-facing points, and maybe also question then to Evelyn Whitlocks on something in that regard, and that is the usability. I mean, the fact that the last graphs on awareness, I'm not too concerned about. I mean, the digital euro is still a couple of years out, at least until it's going to be there. So I think the awareness is not something that we have to worry about now. But there is something on usability, and having now talked to a range of, for example, also banks that have to implement the digital euro, I think for me, if I think about my own, usage, I think what needs to happen is that whatever payment means I'm currently using is not replaced. That's one thing, but also that that the digital euro is easy to use. And in the current regulation, for example, it says that there should be like a new app created by the banks on the basis of a white label app that the European Parliament will commission. The European Central Bank will commission. And I'm just wondering a bit, isn't what we should regulate that every wallet that currently is integrating any form of cards from banks or any form of payment means from banks should also just be able to host the digital euro as provided for by the bank. So I'm wondering a bit whether we are making our lives complex by forcing banks to also create an extra digital euro app hosted by their own bank, and whether it would be much easier if you just say, look, for Google Pay, Apple Pay, for EP or what other kind of wallet already exists, there should be a form of integration that allows, the digital euro card that I get from, or like the digital euro means of payment that I get from my bank to be added into it, rather than to enforce an extra app by the bank. And I understand that for those banks that do not provide a wallet yet, or have no integration with other wallets, or also for people who are unbanked and who don't need or who don't use banks, that maybe a specific new wallet could be created or a new app could be created, but that we're maybe creating a bit too much complexity by not thinking about the end consumer enough. I think that is the question that I'm definitely asking myself. And then maybe another question, and that goes a bit in the similar direction. The privacy seems to be a key point of interest for consumers, and I think you have shown that very well. Is it really like the offline privacy of cash that we want to aim for, or would it just be enough if for the online payments we create a level of privacy that is similar to the one that we currently have with the normal Visa and MasterCard payments? I think this is the two questions I'm currently bothering with. Do we really need the offline digital euro to replace cash? But especially like for the ease of use, how do we make that possible without creating too much extra hassle for consumers with extra apps?
Damien, thank you so much. Really interesting. We'll allow some of the other speakers to come in on some of those questions you've raised shortly. I'm going to come to you, Seu. Perhaps I can get your impression of what you've heard in the survey, what Maria presented, perhaps any initial thoughts about where we are with the digital euro from the side of the Commission.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Thank you to BEUC for doing the survey and organizing this conference, which is definitely very, very timely. Well, first of all, as has been highlighted, we are in the middle of the negotiations with the Council and the Parliament on this legislative proposal. So even if indeed the Commission's proposal was adopted a while ago, the Commission remains very closely involved in this process, and it is certainly very interested in any information that can support this process. And certainly the results that we have here, on the one hand, they support or confirm the stance taken in the Commission's proposal to include in the basic features of the digital euro easiness of use, security, and a high level of privacy. So this shows indeed that the Commission's proposal had the right approach, but it also gives some interesting insights on aspects that perhaps can be further detailed in the framework of these negotiations with Council and Parliament, such as, for instance, the aspect of the consequences of fraud, even though the PSR in particular will indeed also apply to the digital euro, and therefore any measures that come out of the PSR with regard to fraud will also apply to the digital euro. One can also think about the easiness of dispute resolution and refunds. So there are some interesting ideas perhaps to explore here and there. So yeah, that would be my first impression. So thank you very much to BEUC for doing this. It's very useful.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really interesting. Let's move on to Vincent. It's great that you're here with us as well. Thank you. 81% of people, according to the survey, have these privacy concerns. That's pretty clear. This suggestion of how the level of privacy in the member state discussions, what are the priorities for you, and what are you hearing from these survey results?
Thank you, Jack, and big shout out to BEUC for organizing this. In general, for BEUC being present in Brussels and having the consumer perspective reflected here in the EU bubble is quite important, because there's many other stakeholders here, but it's very good that BEUC is there, and also on this very important and sensitive topic, digital euro. I think privacy from our side, it's sort of a step zero in this whole project. We need to have the highest privacy in this project that is possible. I agree with Mr. Boeselager that on online, by the very nature of the thing, and this is actually a thing me and Evelien discussed in Copenhagen, it is quite a fundamental step, this digital euro. So this warrants our continued attention also to the going forward, and also the fact that it's non-programmable. So these are important things. Then maybe going a bit back, I know Anna said in the beginning, there's many discussions on the design features and how we design the digital euro. I think still these discussions are to be had, and we are having these. So in the parliament, the rapporteur there is having this quite fundamental debate. And I think Evelien just now showed a lot of reasons why we can be in favor of the digital euro. And I think it has been some sort of evolution. You hear often the digital euro is a solution looking for a problem. I think there's many problems and vulnerabilities out there. And I think that's the discussion we're having now, but it's quite abstract for the consumer. So maybe we can delve into it later. I think the interoperability, the fact that we're reliant on schemes, consumers don't see that directly front-facing, but in the back, of course, we as policymakers should focus on that. So that's an important point for us. From your study, I also take away people want ease of use and want it secure. I think that's very important, and we can have this as principles, but we should also deliver on it. So that's for the euro system to design. Again, the question of Damian, how do we integrate the digital euro in our existing payment infrastructure? It's still quite tricky. So Evelien can probably say more about that later. And we're also later, of course, consumers want it free, but there is a cost behind this infrastructure. So the digital euro should for sure not lead to an increase in costs or to a significant increase in costs. It's definitely an attention point also for us in council. But this from my side is a starting point. Sorry if I was too long.
No, you're wonderful. Thanks so much for coming in and giving us your insights. It's really interesting because it needs that support, and the member states need to be behind it and understand it, and the practicalities of this as well. Evelien, I'm going to come to you. We'll come back. I mean, Damien started there a bit about how to use already existing apps or how to bring in banks. That was a question slightly for you. Perhaps is there anything in the survey as well that stuck out to you? It broadly supported what you were saying in your presentation as well.
Yeah, thank you. Let me come back to the points that were raised. But before doing that, I think it's good to say something on the survey itself. As I said already in my presentation, it's very important that we get this information. We do also quite some work in the Eurosystem ourselves. We have also done some research on vulnerable citizens and small merchants. We're still finalizing the research, but it's good to have also independent research that complements all the work that we are doing, because in the end, since digital will be a public good, we need to make sure that its usability is very high, and I think that was mentioned by all the previous speakers. So I think that we have a common goal. Of course, then the question is how to do that. And there, the BEUC study really gave some additional information. So, for example, the information, and you highlighted that as well, so more on the teenagers and their use still of cash, but also their needs in a digital environment was not something that we had already researched, so that is very helpful. And also the concerns around fraud and risk and disputes are very helpful to protect the digital euro as good as possible and to make it as safe and secure as possible going forward. So again, this input is very important for us, and we will take this further along. I would like to react on the app point, because I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. So the draft legislation says that banks need to connect their systems to a digital euro app. But that doesn't preclude, and actually it has been from the start in our design, that we think, and that it's most logic, that banks will integrate it in their current solutions. So while this is not made mandatory in the regulation or in the draft that is currently there, it is taken as an assumption and an explicit assumption that we have been very vocal on. And in that line, we have also done work in the rulebook to define the minimum UX standards. So if it's not a Digital Euro app, we need to make sure that there's minimum UX standards, for example, to make sure that it's very inclusive and easy to use. So in the whole design, it is understood, and we indeed think that it's good if people can use their own the apps that are already provided by their PSPs currently. So we very much encourage that. There will be, at least that's our proposal, and that's also in the current draft legislation, that there is also a Digital Euro app that will be provided separately. It will be a rather thin app, so meaning that it allows you to enter to your bank. Let's say you're a customer of Deutsche Bank or Santander. You can use the app, and then you will see that you will interact with your bank, but you can use it. We think that this app provides value for a couple of reasons. So we can really pay additional attention to inclusion. All apps need to be included, but we can go one step above. Secondly, it increases the resilience, and thirdly, for example, if you would have multiple accounts, there's one way to access your multiple accounts. But I want to make clear that it's not only the Digital Euro, and they don't need to build their own app. They need to connect to an app that will be provided by the Digital Euro. Sorry to explain a bit right, but and it will provide choice. So consumers can then choose which app to use. Yeah, let me stop here. And there are more questions, I know, that we can dive deeper on that.
This is that balance, though, like the need for choice and sort of the options, but not an overwhelming choice where it becomes sort of unworkable. This is the design in the detail is so important in how to do this. Let's come to you, Vinay. Thank you so much for being here. We've looked at the pan-European study. You obviously look at things from a Portuguese perspective. Does this match up with what you guys know in Portugal? And also perhaps you can pick up a little bit on how Digital Euro features can actually support consumers. What are you looking at, the consumer uptake at least? What are you guys looking at in Portugal?
Yeah. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, of course, to BEUC for organizing this, and for us from consumer representatives, but also consumers in the end. It's very timely to start discussing this. And as someone mentioned already, there's still a couple of years in the future to having a Digital Euro. But it's still, if we don't discuss this now, and we don't have this exchange of views and exchange of concerns, in the end, we may have a product which is underserving and which we don't want to get to. From a Portuguese perspective, the awareness levels are very low, of course. This is a discussion that is still growing, let's say. There are some reports in the media. We, from the Consumer Protection Association, we also have included this in our financial literacy programs. We already discussed about the upcoming project for the upcoming Digital Euro. However, I mean, overall, the results for Portugal are very in line with what happens in Europe. There are a couple of figures which I would like to allude to, which are showing some different trends in Portugal, especially, for example, the cases related to fraud and refunds. So in Portugal, the respondents from Portugal have a higher concern. So they would actually want this to be more addressed than the average of the EU respondents to the other respondents to the survey. And it's also interesting to notice that regarding privacy, again, Portuguese respondents were more concerned about privacy issues. And finally, one topic that is very dear to us in Portugal is universal acceptance And here, of course, Portugal again, the Portuguese respondents were highly in favor of having very strong features and rules for universal acceptance. And why? This goes in hand with the big discussion currently going on in Portugal about universal acceptance of cash per se. We have, since the introduction of the euro in Portugal, somewhat embedded in law that payments in euro cash are mandatorily accepted. However, and due to a strange feature in our legislation, there is no sanctioning for those who don't accept payments in cash in Europe, in Portugal. Because of that framework, we do see a trend of growing businesses and events where you're not allowed to pay in cash. So this is already a sign that in progressing this project, we also must progress in the legal tender of cash proposal and making sure that not only the legal tender of cash ensures mandatory acceptance of cash, but also the digital form of euro is mandatorily accepted. So these are already some features that I think address your question, Jack. So I hope so.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you so much, Vinay. It's really interesting. I want to come back to you, Seo, actually. Let's talk a little bit about how things are being baked in on this as we work through this in a sort of policy way. Perhaps you can tell us from the Commission side how consumer expectations are being reflected in the Commission's proposal, this suggestion of the digital app. How does that all work from how you're thinking about the practicalities of this? You're on mute, Seo. Sorry. You're muted.
Sorry for that. I have been muted and I did not realize it. So perhaps allow me to remind a few features of our Commission proposal, which are important to illustrate how indeed consumer expectations on the digital euro have been taken into account. Firstly, we grant legal tender to the digital euro, which indeed requires it to be made widely available and also widely accepted for payments. This immediately addresses the point by the Portuguese colleague here in the panel that the digital euro will have to be accepted by merchants in general, with very small exceptions, and to make it widely available. The idea is that banks are mandated to give their clients access to the digital euro, and that other PSPs will also be able to offer the digital euro services on a voluntary basis. What happens if a consumer does not have a bank account or does not even want to have, let's say, an account with a bank, an account in digital euros with a bank, he will or she will be able to also get it from a designated entity that can be indeed different from a bank, depending on the choice of a member state. So it could be, for instance, a post office, which often has or already, let's say, has the vocation, so to say, to provide some services and ensure financial inclusion. Then PSPs, which will distribute the digital euro, will have to offer a set of basic digital euro services at zero cost, which obviously will make these services, by definition, very accessible and affordable. And in addition, the Commission proposes also a set of basic functionalities for the digital euro, such as usage and service features that are simple and easy to handle. This has been stressed as an outcome of the survey, including for people with disabilities, functional limitations, etc. And it should obviously comply with the European Accessibility Act requirements. In fact, it will go beyond. And so the ECB will have to apply these features into the design of the digital euro, as Evelyn has explained. And in addition to that, the digital euro transactions will also be protected by the same requirements, obligations for PSPs as payment solutions that are offered by the private sector. And that will ensure a high level of consumer protection. So the PSD and PSR frameworks will apply, which will be important indeed with regard to fighting fraud and for fraud redress as well. And in addition, the ECB can also implement fraud prevention and dispute resolution mechanism. So all in all, we believe that the digital euro features will be in line with consumer expectations. But as I said earlier, there are also interesting additional ideas in this in the survey by BEUC. And one thing I have also noted with regard to the value added of the digital euro is that current payment solutions do not provide a sufficient level of accessibility. And therefore, indeed, the digital euro can bring a plus, and it is good that the debate has moved from the why, the digital euro, to the how now, and we are really concentrating on the how and making it as easy as possible for consumers, as convenient as possible, as secure as possible, as private as possible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, that's kind of the point in this survey and this discussion as well, is like, stop the sort of why and is it happening, but let's get on and work out how to do this. Damien, I want to come to you because you're part of the political discussions, obviously, in the European Parliament. I see you post some Instagram videos about it, trying to explain it as well. But this stuff, it's delicate because I've heard some people say we've got one shot at the digital euro. If the uptake isn't accepted, then it can be really complicated. It needs to be done right first time. Can you tell us about how the discussions are happening in the European Parliament to ensure that, and what you expect from the report that the European Parliament's going to be putting together, I believe, for May?
Yes, so I hope the connection is good enough and you can hear me well. Please interrupt me if it should not be the case. Okay, very good. So, I mean, I think it's interesting to sit here at the consumer protection workshop, because in the end, look, I think if consumers see an added value, and privacy is, for example, one of these added values, if consumers see an added value because ease of use is high, I think then the adoption will be successful. If we fail to, like, build a secure and private payment system or stock of value, let's see, then of course, like, it will not be successful. But I think the risk for consumers is rather low in this regard. Also, I mean, within the fights that we have within the European Parliament, and also with like discussions we have with the ECB or the European Commission, or even with the Council representatives, I think on these consumer-facing topics, there's not such a big controversy, to be honest. I think I mean, if the digital euro failed, I don't think it would harm consumers directly, because they would just not be using it. I think long-term consumer value is, of course, that to have a reliable system, payment system overall, is super important. Yeah? So, like, let's say there should really be a situation where Visa and MasterCard fail. Of course, then consumers would be harmed massively, and that's why also, I mean, this is one of the main reasons for having or introducing the digital euro. I think the higher risk at the moment lies of making it so complex that somehow it's very hard to build with banks, making it too expensive somehow, so that, like, the system is not competitive, and so on. So these are more questions that will probably affect banks and maybe merchants more than necessarily consumers. So if you ask about how the dynamics are, yes, I think there's a slow movement also in the European Parliament, also by the rapporteur, so the chief negotiator of the digital euro in the European Parliament, to not question the whole train as a whole, at least openly, but to rather think about how to time it, where I'm more for, like, let's say, a fast introduction, and maybe the conservative rapporteur is more for like a delayed introduction that would allow the private sector to catch up. But I think it's moving, and I'm asking myself exactly the same question: how can we make it as simple as possible for all stakeholders involved, so that the chance of it not working out is as least as possible. Yeah, so I think and that's where we also like to have input from all players, including BEUC and others, to really think, okay, what are the design choices we have to make now that will make it very simple to use? So does it really make sense that consumers have to charge their offline digital euro with a transaction that they do there, or should it somehow be automatically charged? If it's automatically charged, what if you have a payment that exceeds what you currently hold in offline digital euros? Do you then have to manually recharge? Like, there's all these kind of very detailed questions that I think have to think through from a consumer's perspective primarily, because that will be the decisive factor for the success.
Yeah, it's really interesting though, because those detailed questions are actually practical. They are the things that consumers will have to confront, and those details need to be really ironed out. I want to come to you, Vincent. Perhaps you can talk us a little bit about how you are considering. Obviously, the discussions are moving forward, the plan is moving forward, but presumably you're putting in some preparations for how you would roll this out nationally, how you would make people in the Netherlands informed what your thinking is in the government. Perhaps you can give us a rundown of that.
Yes, so we're still negotiating in council as well, in addition to the EP. So we have not started this, but our communication department is already, according to the sort of government communication guidelines, if the digital euro comes, it is indeed very important to inform the public about what it is, why we introduce it. We're not there yet, but we're thinking ahead of that. And I think in the Netherlands, we had quite an interesting lead up to this project, because actually after the crisis, we had a theater play on our monetary system, which actually created a lot of buzz around people understanding money, thinking about this. And actually this led to a scientific report on our monetary system, where actually one of the recommendations was a digital version of cash that should be investigated. So it led to a lot of public interest, I think a healthy debate. Then COVID happened. Unfortunately, the digital euro became a bit toxic. But I think now, with the train moving, and as said, there's still some important design features that have not been agreed upon. So let's not preempt that too much. But indeed, I think explaining to the public what we are doing, why we're doing, what kind of safeguards are in place on privacy, on the fact that it's non-programmable, is very important. So we are, thinking of that already. But it's a bit too early for that now. But your event is also addressing this.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's one of those policy things that it always needs to have the practical end of what it's going to mean for consumers using it at the end. So whenever you're discussing the policy, it needs that practicality in the information going out. Evelyn, I'm going to come back to you. Perhaps we can talk a little bit about the digital euro rulebook group, how that's going to be used. Consumers obviously, and as we saw in the survey, are really worried about protection against fraud, rights to refund. Can you dig in a little bit more about how that will look, how that will be structured?
Yeah, that's so we have a rulebook development group, as I said before, in which we put all the parties at the table, and that's actually quite unique. If you look to other payment schemes, they normally have only the payment service providers at the table. Of course, as was also said by Damien, it's also logic because they need to provide a lot of the services, but we believe that it's of a big value that we have all the stakeholders, so also the end users of the consumers and the merchants on one table, because sometimes you need to make some trade-offs. So I think to the point that was made before on usability, keep it simple, make sure that people want to adopt it. I think that's true for all three stakeholders, major stakeholders. So it needs to be an efficient something to implement for the banks. They need to get a fair compensation for the work that they do in the distribution of the digital euro. For the merchants, they need to have an incentive to accept the digital euro. We need to make sure, because of the legal tender that was explained by CU, there is an obligation. So we need to make sure that this is not misused for them on the cost side, and also for them it would need to be easy to implement. And then it needs to be something that's attractive for the consumer. There are a couple of elements. So the free for basic use, of course, makes it attractive, but usability is extremely important. And I agree with Damien. I think in the proposal from the Commission that's currently being discussed, I think it's a good proposal for all three stakeholders, also for the consumers. Of course, the legislators are making some changes, and I think what's important is that we keep asking when we make those, not we, but the legislator makes these changes. It's still attractive for all three stakeholders, and of course, it's very difficult to have always a win-win-win for everybody, but we need to at least do the check if we make changes to keep the right balance going forward. To come back to the rulebook development group, there we also work, as I said, so on usability and how that could work, but also on the fundamental things to really make sure that this is a safe and secure one. This is in the more technical design, but also on the ability to have disputes. If something not going right, how would you be able as a consumer to get your money back if there's fraud? How do we in the system prevent against fraud? So there we really build also on expert knowledge from the market, from all stakeholders, to really develop the best way forward and to make it as secure as we can going forward.
Vinay, let me bring you in on this. Perhaps you can talk to me a little bit about that's one of the big problems for consumers. That's one of the things they're looking at. What are the best ways, or what are the ways at all, that we can ensure people avoid fraud, especially in that early uptake period where it could be so damaging to how people would use it once it comes in, this digital euro?
Thank you. Yeah, fraud is a big topic on payments. It's been there for a while. We've been advocating for more and more involvement of all parties, all stakeholders, as Evelyn was saying, in different fora we are participating on. From a payments perspective, if you look at just on a global payments perspective, we now have a trend for a while of fraud, which is of a level that goes beyond the actual instrument itself. Now it's addressing the user. So we need to understand that there's for example, it's very common to hear the word or the term social engineering attacks, right? So if we look at the current framework under the Payment Service Directive 2, this is not suitable to prevent and to help consumers who are subject to fraud in Europe. And the reports by the ECB and the EBA, for example, show us that, for example, in recent years, in fraud cases, 86% of payment fraud was borne by the consumers. So this is a huge number. So when we look at the current discussions of the payment service regulation, we are hoping that there are better provisions addressing consumer protection and prevention of fraud, and also helping consumers in case of fraud. So that's key. It was mentioned that, of course, the provisions of the upcoming PSR will be applicable to digital euro. That's good. Let's see if it actually goes in the right direction, if the PSR provisions actually address these already existing types of fraud, but they must be future looking as well. Because as we also know, fraudsters are typically one step ahead of regulation which is being implemented or designed. And we're talking about the digital world. So digital payments, digital euro. We already have a certain number of consumers who are very, let's say, conservative about using digital payments. For example, there's a huge number of people who don't even use bank apps on their smartphones. So we must also make sure that the whole environment is safe for users to use payments with the digital euro. In that sense, we must, of course, dispute resolution is one of the issues, but again, the legal framework is very key. For example, the concept of the gross negligence, which is under the PSR and in the current PSD2, which is very difficult to firstly explain, and actually is being applied across the board. So in all cases, you will have consumers being considered grossly negligent for a fraud that is made or they're led into using, for example, social engineering. So that's the typical feature from a regulatory perspective that we already should have before actually applying the digital euro.
Yeah, really, thank you so much. I mean, this is it as well, where the legislation needs to protect the consumer without the consumer necessarily knowing too much in depth about the legislation, and that's where the updates need to be. Do you know, we've got some we've actually had quite a few questions coming in, and I think maybe it's a good opportunity to just get to the Q&A now. There's some nice there's a nice question I want to start here with, and this is slightly conceptual but also practical. The question is, if a consumer believes in the digital euro, could they avoid opening a bank account like you could with cash, right? You could just have it in your presence. How can they deposit cash into a digital euro account if they don't have a bank account? Is there any scope for that? I suppose we can start. Anyone can come in on this, but I suppose Evelyn or Seu, if you'd like to jump in.
I can jump in. Indeed, the Commission's proposal foresees that even if you don't have a bank account, you can get access to a digital euro account. In fact, you need to have holdings in digital euro to make transactions. You need therefore to fund this, and to do that, the Commission's proposal indeed is clear that if a consumer wants to get a digital euro account, it has does not have a bank account, it has the right to get it, and to get it from a designated entity that member states will have to indeed decide upon, that can carry out this task, in addition to the payment service providers that are banks or non-banks. So this is a right that the legislative proposal grants to users, and they can fund it with cash if they don't have indeed a bank account.
Yeah. Would any of our other speakers like to jump in on this question?
Yeah, maybe just very quickly. I think like the idea of the public option is super cool. Yeah, like basically you could go to your whatever system your country does, like the post office or whatever, to verify your identity, and then you could activate your digital euro account, and then have this option to pay. I think here also the complexity is a bit like, okay, so how do I charge it? How is the funding done? And also how does the public option check whether I already use a private option somewhere? Like is the name going to be so precise that this is sufficient for the check, or in the end, is it possible to hold both a public option digital euro account and a private? And maybe if someone has a very similar name to me, is there going to be a difficulty that I'm blocked from it, even though I don't have a private bank account? So I think there's a lot of these details that I'm really wondering. For example, maybe it's easier to just allow everyone to have a public account, but just one, and then whether they have a private one in addition doesn't really matter so much. And I know some banks then are very concerned about it, but I think that's something to definitely consider. Just like all these little steps where we could potentially make mistakes and make it harder is something I'm considering.
Yeah, that leads on to quite nicely to another question that was in here, that throughout both presentations, the digital euro was presented as a digital form of cash. But the question is that at least one key difference is that the digital euro will be intermediated by banks, as we've heard, but with the app as well. But banks, but according to this question, are not very happy to deliver the service, which could compete with their own products, Visa and MasterCard, long-standing relationships, these kind of things. How do we ensure that consumers it doesn't compete with what banks are offering them as a bank option as well, and that it doesn't get too confusing in and around that? Vinny, I can see you're there.
It's exactly one of the big issues that we are facing when we address consumers, when we talk about digital euro. One of the questions is, what's the difference between the digital euro and the electronic form of payment I have now, which is bank money? And the other question, which is I already saw also someone addressing in either the chat or the Q&A, which is the digital euro a stable coin or a cryptocurrency? That's something that we need to actually take out of the way. And when we do the awareness campaigns, when we do the information campaigns, that's probably one of the most important questions to address, the distinction between digital euro and a stable coin or a cryptocurrency, which is not the case. But looking at how to make it interesting for the consumer, I won't be, of course, saying how do we make it interesting for banks? If that's the question, that's not my place to answer. But I will answer from a consumer perspective. We must make sure that consumers consider this as one other option to pay, along with cash, of course, and that's for sure, and every other existing payment method. However, if it's a public good, if it's a public solution, we also must make sure that it's, of course, as we already discussed, universally accepted, accessible, but also free of cost, or as low as possible. When we talk about potential added value features that could be charged extra by credit institutions, we must be clear on what are the added value. If there is an added value of those features, they should be, of course, transparent on how this added value is actually perceived. I'm probably misunderstood something that was said earlier, but I would not consider privacy features as an added value that could be charged separately, because privacy features should be across the board, and they shouldn't be considered as something that could be added on and then charged extra if they're provided above what is in the basic proposal or basic account features. And of course, another point is to be available everywhere. It was considered that, along with the banks, you will all potentially have post office services, but this depends on the member state. In some member states, you have a postal service which is very present. Other member states, it's not so real. So we also must understand if there's another way to make it accessible for everyone. So yeah, this is it at this point. Thanks.
Yeah, and this is where the information across member states needs to be sort of founded and known long in advance. Exactly. Let's pick up on that idea of a stable coin. I mean, the idea of a cryptocurrency tagged to a commodity or a sort of stable currency, which is what a stable coin is. Evelyn, I'll come to you because this is a concern. A lot of people don't like the idea of being involved in cryptocurrencies. They don't want their money in cryptocurrencies. So if people start talking about it as a stable coin, that would cause some problems, perhaps. I don't know what you think about that, or what your concerns are around that sort of suggestion.
And we're very clear in all our communication that the digital euro will not be a cryptocurrency and will not be a stable coin. The only thing we can do is to keep repeating that, and if you can all help us to keep repeating that in wherever you are, that would be helpful, because misinformation is something that is difficult to correct. But I just want to be very clear on the record on that. So that won't be that. And I wanted to say something else, but I forgot what I wanted to say. So I might leave it at that.
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you when you, and hopefully it will ping back into your brain. I'm terrible for that as well. Vincent, perhaps I can come to you. This suggestion of a stable coin. One of the sort of second part of the question that was put there is, will it be subjected to the same taxation as cryptocurrencies? I mean, again, it's this. Yeah, I can see Evelyn shaking her head, but Vincent, I'll come to you on this because this is what people are thinking, and these are the questions people are asking, obviously.
Yeah, very easy question. No, it's not. I mean, stable coins, I mean, it's a new phenomenon and we'll have to see what the added value is. To be honest, me as an economist, okay, I used the term ledger before. Okay, if some stable coins might also try to be a good payment system, maybe cross-border. And in that sense, the digital euro is not that, it's not a stable coin. But of course, one of the important goals of it is to have a better payment system in Europe. That's definitely one argument that Evelien also said in her presentation. So it can allow us in Europe to be more interoperable, to sort of force this network throughout Europe. And that in the end, of course, also helps us as Europeans and makes us less reliant on outside forces. So I think someone in the chat also said, nothing is for free. And I think this is also in council now an important topic. In the negotiations, this also was in the media. We've solved one issue, which is the holding limit. How much digital euros can you hold? We solved it in council as sort of a governance arrangement. So we didn't pick a certain number, but we'll have a good distribution of competences between us as legislators and the ECB to come to a right number, how many digital euros people can hold. But one other outstanding difficult discussion ahead is the compensation model. And exactly how much can people charge each other? And here, Evelien said win-win-win. This will probably not be possible, but we have to make sure that we equally distribute it. For example, in the Netherlands, and Evelien knows more about it, she's been working in payments her whole life, we've actually forced quite a low equilibrium of prices. So that's good for the consumers, but it's quite a challenge given our fragmented landscape in Europe to enforce that in Europe. And then I maybe give it back to Evelien, who probably knows what she wanted to say on stablecoin.
Has it come back to you?
Yes, but it was not related to stablecoins, by the way. But let me do two things. So I'll react on Vincent's point. So indeed, the compensation model is an important model to get a political agreement on. There's of course a basic proposal which is in the council proposal, but and there indeed the aim would be to really make sure that it's a fair model for all involved. I think that, and that I, from the discussions that I see, I think everybody comes in with that intention. And then it's important constantly to check whatever changes we're going to make to the proposal, that it stays fair for everybody. An important helping thing there would be is that because the digital euro would be like cash, part of the cost will be taken by the euro system, like we also do for cash. So we take some cost out for which we get interest income, so that would not be on society's shoulders. But that could help. But I think it's an important discussion to really make sure that it's fair for all stakeholders there. What I wanted to say, and it's touched upon a couple of times on communication. So I know, and Vincent also answered on that. So the Commission, the parties, the Council, also the ECB, we do a lot to make sure that there is factual information that's also able to understand. But the real big communication campaigns you will only do once there is a legislation adopted, of course, because otherwise, what were you talking about? And also closer to the issues, because if we make people enthusiastic, I don't know, 2.5 years in advance, people would think, okay, great, where can I get it? Well, you have to wait 2.5 years. So the timing of the campaigns will be a bit later, but they are very much on the radar. But we need to also position that in time, just to give an explanation on that.
Thank you, Evelien. Right, I'm going to move on to, we've got a couple of questions that I'd like to touch on. We're starting to get towards the end of the time that we prescribed for this discussion. So let's just try and get to a couple more. This is an interesting aspect. The question is, it may change in the near future, but payments, the payments world is global and dominated by US and Chinese players. And that raises two questions. This question says, One, a number of countries have already launched CBFC, the Bahamas, Nigeria, Jamaica, and they say with very limited usage. Why would the digital euro be more successful? And the other part of this question is about the geopolitical context, which they suggest is degrading. The US President Donald Trump has said that a digital dollar would be a tyranny, and in Russia, the digital ruble is sort of programmed to limit only certain purchases. Why is the digital euro different? So I'll come to you on this one to start with.
Seems that I have been muted again. Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I would start by saying that the digital euro is very singular as compared to these initiatives because of two key reasons. The first one is that it is a project that involves 21 countries. It's not a single jurisdiction. And indeed, one of the value added of the digital euro will be to establish a pan-European payment solution, which in fact does not exist. So that cannot be comparable to the situation of single jurisdictions like Nigeria or the Bahamas, indeed, where on top of that, payments remain largely cash-based. And we have a totally different ecosystem in Europe. We have well-established payments, which also makes it a challenge for the digital euro. But the digital euro is not meant to crowd out other payment solutions, but indeed to coexist and to bring that diversity that consumers are calling for as well, which indeed has probably not been the case, in these projects that you mentioned. I also often hear the example of Brazil as to why Brazil has implemented BEUC successfully. Why don't we do the same in Europe? Well, we have established all the conditions for the private sector to embrace instant payments, but we cannot do it for them. So the situation is not at all comparable with Brazil, which again, on top of that, like for Nigeria or the Bahamas, had a very low usage level of payments because they were too expensive, simply. Card payments were awfully expensive in Brazil. The level of financial inclusion was very low. So BEUC developed in an ideal environment, in a very steered environment by the Central Bank of Brazil. So I think what I mean to say with this is that you cannot compare, all these initiatives. It's like comparing apples with pears.
Thanks, Sue. Damien, I'll come to you on this because while the sort of understanding is that it can't be compared, there will be made some comparisons, right? Especially if there is opposition to it.
Yes. Allow me also to quickly react on the compensation model. Just one little point. I think, when I started looking at this whole payment system as it is now, it basically means, things are free for consumers, which basically means that you can pay anywhere and you won't be surcharged for using any payment method. But then, of course, the merchant is charged and pays a fee that then fuels the whole system. And I was just wondering, and I stopped now thinking about it, but like in the beginning of if the cost for this new digital euro system lie mostly and exclusively, actually, almost with the banks, to a small degree also with merchants maybe for the terminals, but if they lie with the banks, why don't we set the fee that merchants pay to zero and tell the banks that apparently it's just a basic cost of running a bank, an account system that they can charge or that they charge all bank accounts, no matter whether you use digital euro or not. at a higher degree. Why? Because then in the end, you would create a competition between the banks of who can offer the cheapest basic bank account with all features, of course, included, because we are requiring it. Anyways, it's just a thought-provoking idea. I think I like competition and the idea of banks competing for lower prices rather than like having some hidden fees within the system makes more sense to me. But it's just a little revolution that I might not make it to. Anyways, then when it comes to the question of the international context and also why the digital euro should work in regards to other payment systems, I mean, yes, of course, the insecurity of the international system, and even for me, who's a transcendentalist and who has lived in the US for 2 years, is that an executive order by a crazy president could lead to our Visa and MasterCard services being down within an hour. Yeah, like that's just the reality that we are facing right now. And so I think the whole idea is to create some form of resilience. I think there's a debate whether our payment as a whole don't have substitutes yet, and whether really there's so much GDP at risk. But let's follow this line of argument. If you believe that because of this resilience issue, I wouldn't call it a sovereignty issue, but a resilience issue, there's a need for a public option, then of course the big advantage of the digital euro versus all other payment system is the legal tender status. So the fact that every merchant everywhere is required to accept it, and that every bank is required to offer it. So I mean, this is the power of the law, the power of mandatory provision and acceptance, and that is what makes this potentially a more successful as a resilience system, So, but I would still say that the ease of adoption is important, and the ease of use in order to make it as smooth as possible.
It's an interesting one when it comes to like the resilience question of the digital euro. I mean, is it going to be something that is compelling for consumers, not if they feel that their money could be lost, Vinay?
Look. So Vinny, so now
Sorry.
I got it. Sorry, over to you. I spoke enough. Thank you.
Sorry.
No. I mean, feel free, Damien, if you want to add something on that. So, sure. Okay, but I'll take up on that. So of course, if you don't create a product which is interesting for consumers, in the end they will continue using what they're used to using. So it's when we talk about competition, and I'm sorry to disagree with you, Damien. From what we perceive, competition is not really existent in all member states for payment systems and for banking products. For example, just to give you an example, there is a framework for basic payment accounts all across EU, and there is the Payment Accounts Directive. But when you look at the pricing models, apart from some member states, and I'm actually lucky that I'm coming from Portugal, where we have a very strict regulation on actually pricing it very low for those who actually need such an account or use such an account. In other member states, it doesn't exist, because the pricing model is so high that the actual basic account, which was supposed to be very low in charge and used for financial inclusion, is actually much more expensive than a regular account. So again, if we develop a new payment system under the Digital Euro program, when we look at payments and costs, we should make sure that the actual costing model is very well set and defined. And when it's supposed to be low, we make rules that make them low. And if it's free of charge, it's free of charge. Otherwise, the competition from a market perspective, it's not very well functioning in all member states. When we look at features, for example, for the digital euro, you mentioned, I think it was Vincent or Damien mentioned that holding limits have been already agreed upon. Well, this was a discussion about whether introducing holding limits would actually make the digital euro less interesting for consumers. So what are we actually looking for? So I hope that if you didn't mention the amount actually agreed upon, but if the amount is so low that the actual payment using digital euro is not interesting for a consumer, then we're reducing the value of this new project. It was the same when we discussed about non-remunerating holdings of digital euro. because again, it was considered competition with bank money, because banks remunerate deposits. Well, not all member states. I'm coming from a member state where our banks actually do not remunerate in a decent level all the deposits from consumers. But again, if you don't remunerate holdings under digital euro, you make it like less interesting feature again for consumers. So just these 2 points are very interesting for us.
Vincent, do you want to come back in on that?
Yes, and it's confusing because some friends of mine called me Vinny. So Vinny, I'm wanting to step in every now and then. No, sorry, it's actually a good name. But yeah, no, on the holding limit. So what we are discussing now, what's at the table and what we have a political mandate for is digital euro as a means of payment. So not as a store of value. So what Evelien also said, it's a virtual version of cash. Me and Vinay could have a discussion aside from this on the more fundamental monetary reform thing. And actually that's what this scientific council in the Netherlands also wrote a report about. It's quite a fundamental thing to have that. So what we decided on the holding limit is more of a governance arrangement where the ECB proposes a level. We as council can agree or propose a different one, but to ensure, because this is what we politically have the mandate for, to not revolutionize the world, but have some evolution in our system, to have it as a means of payment. So that on that. But I see your point on the consumers, that taken.
Thanks so much, Vinay. The other Vinay. There's actually a question that's come in, and I think probably because it's directed towards BEUC, it's worth asking this. The question is, on the offline, does BEUC have a view on the type of devices or its functioning beside the apps? The question is for instance, the ECB is considering the possibility of a battery-powered smart card with a keypad and a screen, or a device like a payment terminal. I think like those white things you kind of see for small like coffee vans and stuff like that, which a user would carry, where the two cards would be inserted to enable the transfer of the digital euro offline between the two users. Excuse me. Has BEUC analyzed these options or surveyed consumers about it? Maria, perhaps, I don't know if you want to come in, maybe Anna as well.
I think I can take that one quickly. I mean, the survey which we did was about asking question about digital payments, so not so much on the digital euro, but rather digital payments to inform the design of the digital euro. And speaking about the smart card, it's something which methodologically it's difficult to ask about in a quantitative questionnaire, because you would need to explain people a little bit what it is about, because I think I saw a lot of people with question marks in their face already when the question was raising. So that's exactly what you would expect from an average consumer as well. Now, we as BEUC, of course, have looked into this when we have discussed that in the ERPB, also a bit in the rulebook. It's an interesting suggestion, the smart card. It's definitely something which needs to be tested with consumers. There are some little elements, for example, how big would be the amount on the smart card? Is it something, for example, a visually impaired person can really read, can really use? So does it serve inclusion, or is it something which will be difficult for someone who is targeted with this card can really be using? But from the start on, we are open and positive and would like to see a bit of more consumer testing on this, but not in the framework of a quantitative questionnaire, but something which is more focus group or this kind of methodology.
Yeah, this feels like
sorry, can I come in on
I was going to say,
one?
yeah, quickly. This feels like we need a quick comment from you, Evelyn. Exactly.
Yeah, no, just to say, so the primary barrier would be the mobile phone. At least it's the easiest one, because the two solutions that you mentioned have significant drawbacks or have drawbacks in usability, in cost and stuff like that. So we are really investigating what we can do next to a digital euro on the phone, and there further user research and together with BEUC we want to do, but we have not committed to one or the other solution yet, as I said, because there's some drawbacks on both solutions actually. So just to be crystal clear where we are in the process.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. Yeah, it was important to get that final comment. Okay, we're done. That's the time up. That's an hour and 45. Thank you so much. I just want to thank Vincent, to Vinay, to Seu, to Evelyn, and to Damien as well. Thanks so much for joining the panel. It's been really, really great. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, learned a lot. A big thank you to Maria and to Anna, who from BEUC, and to Andrew as well, and all the BEUC team who have worked on this, worked on the event, worked on the survey. Great work, and a massive thanks to everyone who's joined this event. It's been fascinating, and I look forward to continuing these discussions with you in the future. I hope to see you on future discussions about this. So I wish you all a wonderful evening and see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.